Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at some real gems from 2023 that I think are well worth your attention, many of which may have slipped under your radar for some reason or another. As always, I'll be focusing on strategic and tactical games across the wide gamut that includes, from turn-based tactics to 4X to city building and more. And if you have any of your own recommendations you'd like to bring to people's attention, please drop them in the comments below. Now, in no particular order and with timestamps down below, let's begin. Last Train Home released early in November, and it's a very interesting blend of real-time stealth tactics and survival strategy gaming set just after World War I. You play as the Czechoslovakian regiment, whose country only just came into existence, but in order to get back home after the war, you actually need to travel all the way through war-torn Russia to the far side before taking a ship back to Central Europe. And how are you making your way across Russia? Well, on a train, on the so-called Last Train Home, as it were. As you make your way through the countryside, you'll need to manage the train as well as the soldiers and workers that are riding on it, and they'll all need feeding and tending to, and considering the circumstances, that means you'll often need to send out parties to investigate opportunities to gather the appropriate resources. You'll also need to stay on top of the fuel requirements of your actual locomotive, and if anything breaks down, you'll need some basic construction materials on hand too. Soldiers that get injured on missions will likely need tending to in the medical car with the help of appropriate resources, and otherwise, you'll also want equipment for use on the battlefield itself. Points of interest along the way will offer not just events with multiple possible outcomes, but also entire real-time tactics missions where you'll pick out your squad based on character classes, levels, and special traits, and then play like a classic RTS, just without the base building, replacing all that instead with special abilities and light stealth elements. You'll manage troop morale and health to keep them fighting. You'll level soldiers and workers up to ensure efficiency and combat capabilities. You'll manage fuel and survival resources. You'll pick out destinations for your train and troops alike, and you'll follow a story in a setting that never really gets much attention in this unique strategy survival game. Last Train Home is well worth checking out. Jagged Alliance 3 was a game I was cautiously optimistic about right up until release, and then I was extremely satisfied with the end result. This turn-based tactical RPG with real-time exploration and stealth and a whole management layer where you look after your mercenary company of misfits is a very fun romp that embodies classic, campy action movie tropes while providing a fun set of mechanics, an interesting narrative, and a characterful cast to enjoy it all with. The game can be quite punishing in all the right ways, forcing you to be both strategic and tactical, hiring the right mercs, paying their salaries, training them at villages and camps, keeping them free from wounds, and balancing your budget are all essential aspects of the game as you move from tile to tile to seek out loot, secure resources and strategic positions, and set up defenses to protect liberated villages and camps alike. You'll spend a decent amount of time learning what makes each class of mercenary tick as you train them along the way to become true specialists or the jack of all trades, and as you do so, relationships between the characters will reveal themselves to cause problems or provide advantages. There are so many moving parts in Jagged Alliance 3 that make it fantastic. It's challenging, it has fresh mechanics, its systems intertwine nicely, it's pretty to look at, and it just has so much attitude to go with it all. The game is different from the standard in all the right ways without abandoning what makes the genre special in the first place. Jagged Alliance 3 is a wonderful time. Pioneers of Pagonia is actually a very recent release, having dropped into early access just earlier this month, and it's basically the Settlers game that we've all been waiting for a very, very long time, especially after the disappointment of the Settlers' New Allies. Designed by the mastermind behind the first Settlers games, Pioneers of Pagonia boasts many similar mechanics and systems and will feel like home to fans of those classics. The general level of hustle and bustle represented in the game is particularly impressive, with hundreds of citizens and massive production chains that they engage with, all in order to produce everything from different kinds of stone to bread to weapons and tools and so on and so forth. Starting from a small landing site, use explorers and scouts to push back the fog of war and expand your territorial claims, gaining access to more resources with which to sustain your population as you build up residential and industrial sectors alike. A multitude of different raw and processed goods give you a lot of options to explore, much more than the norm in this genre at any rate, and I particularly like watching the characterful animations as your citizens engage in manufacturing the various processed items. What's also interesting is how you're not particularly fussed about the individual wants and needs of your citizens, like most city builders, and instead are focused on the needs of your growing city, pushing for more production capabilities as well as stronger troops to protect your home with, or to expand across the island with. Pioneers of Pagonia is a vibrant, beautiful city builder with some great ideas to dive into, both old and new. Park Beyond is a game I'd been excited for from the moment it was first announced, and it absolutely delivered when it released earlier this year. As a fan of Roller Coaster Tycoon and others like it, I'm always looking for the next big theme park management game that is a good ride designer. Planet Coaster really set the bar a handful of years ago, so Park Beyond had huge shoes to fill, and they found a way to do so by deciding to ignore the laws of physics and by throwing out the limitations of safety protocols. In Park Beyond, you use the power of Imagineering to create truly zany rides, from roller coasters with jumps and boosters and more, alongside classic loops and corkscrews, to upgraded variants of flat rides that fling people in the air or dip them in water or do God knows what. Research technology to unlock new possibilities and work within the game's loose rules to build the kind of park you could never build in any previous theme park tycoon game. You'll manage guest and staff happiness and the placement of concession stands and things of that nature too, and you'll be able to customize spaces with a fairly robust and complex modular construction toolset. But the rides is where you'll likely spend most of your time and creative energy. That's not to downplay the management aspects of the game. You'll balance budgets, train staff, adjust ticket prices, test rides, etc., but the USP here is the ride design, and with a variety of themes to choose from, with new ones still being added, it's just such a great time. Park Beyond is well worth checking out. City Skylines 2 is a bit of an outlier in this list. For one, chances are you've definitely heard of this game, and for two, it's a gem that still needs a bit of polishing. The reason I include it here is because it's very possible you've seen the initial backlash to some aspects of the game and have decided that it's not for you just quite yet, and that's perfectly fair, of course. But I feel like it's worth highlighting the fact that improvements have already been made to the massive city builder, and that you should definitely keep your eye on it as the devs continue to chip away at its various issues and start to provide proper mod support especially, something that made the first game particularly stand out. Making a sequel to a game like City Skylines is definitely challenging, since there's years of post-launch content and mods to make up for, but some of the new tools and options in this sequel are very promising for what's to come. If you're interested in some modern-day city building, City Skylines 2 is definitely one to keep an eye out for in early 2024. Wartales finally released into 1.0 this year, and it also got a nautical-themed DLC just a few days ago, and if you're a fan of Battle Brothers, chances are you'll enjoy Wartales as it's clearly inspired by the former. Lead your band of mercenaries in this sandbox RPG where you run from town to town seeking out quests, pursuing riches, and engaging in turn-based tactical combat, of course with your band of different classes, each with different equipment, abilities, and characteristics. All the familiar trappings of the genre are present, with some stunning visuals and some fresh ideas like occupations for your party members, and like minigames for typically mundane tasks like crafting, where your results will actually directly impact your outcomes. You'll battle bandits, merchants, and the law itself if you choose to become a bandit crew, but you'll also fight more fantastical beasts from time to time as well. The game has come a long way since its early access release, and if you haven't already picked it up, now is a great time to do so. Phantom Brigade was looking like top 5 material throughout its early access period, and anybody who watched my streams basically watched me transform into a kid again, commanding awesome mechs in epic battles with super cool visuals and a great turn-based combat system that kept things high octane and interesting, with some very, very cool customization options too. This really felt like BattleTech on steroids at the time, and even though the final release fell a little short on expectations, the developers have just recently announced that they're going to be making some updates to the game to cover some of those bases and make Phantom Brigade live up to those gargantuan expectations. So, I still consider this to be one of this year's gems, especially for just how flawlessly many of its ideas were executed. Rather than regular turn-based combat, here you're planning your moves and attacks along a timeline, where both sides' turns play out simultaneously. Your predictive AI allows you to see what the enemy is planning, so you can plan your moves accordingly. And there's something just so epic about your 4-mech squad coordinating to take out a superior enemy force in style. The animations are excellent, and the tools of the trade make for epic moments, whether fighting from range or in melee, jumping off rooftops, using jetpacks to rush around, and sniping from halfway across the map. Destructible environments, mech customization options for days, and a vast array of weapons made this such a fun game to experiment with and play. This is definitely worth picking up to try out its awesome, unique mechanics and to just see some amazing mech-on-mech action scenes that will make Michael Bay jealous. Xenonauts 2 is the brutal turn-based tactics defend the Earth against aliens game for fans of the original XCOM games from back in the day. Before I start, heads up, I'm affiliated with the publisher Hooded Horse, but that's obviously not why this game is here. For more details on that affiliation, check out the link in the description. Now, with that said, what makes Xenonauts 2 so great? Well, first, I should clarify that you don't need to have played Xenonauts 1 to play this title. It starts from the beginning, with your task force of Xenonauts responsible for fighting off the growing alien threat during this invasion. You'll establish multiple bases around the world. You'll plan their layouts while taking into consideration proximity bonuses for their substructures, while also trying to figure out what need each substructure fulfills. And you'll even spend time specializing these bases depending on their location and coverage. Some will help spot UFOs, while others might be home to your air force that can be sent in to intercept said UFOs. You'll have scientists performing research and engineers crafting all manner of gear, including mobile weapons platforms and aircraft and alien-inspired weapons too. A lot of the features here will be familiar to fans of the genre, but I can't stress the unforgiving nature of this game enough, where aliens respond to your presence from the very start of the mission, reacting to your arrival rather than arbitrary triggers waiting for you to find them. This means that you're being hunted right from the start from the shadows as you try to establish lines of sight, slowly fanning out and taking cover and using the right firing modes and the right guns to cause the right amount of damage to the right enemy at the right time. There are a lot of extremely fine details in this game, and with some really interesting enemies to shoot down and investigate even in early access, the game is definitely worth checking out. Desynced released into early access earlier this year, and if you're a fan of factory games like Factorio and Satisfactory, this one's definitely worth considering, as it takes the best parts of the genre and adds its own twist by applying a more high-tech, digital-centric approach to it all. You arrive on an alien planet after your ship suffers damage, and starting with just a few drones and some mining tools, you need to establish a base of operations and acquire resources, manufacture more and more advanced goods, and ultimately develop a solution to your problem, all while the local fauna makes it quite apparent that you're not welcome on this planet. The big differentiator here is that rather than using conveyor belts and suitably Industrial Revolution-era tools of automation, you're using automation systems of the robotic age. Drones will move goods between buildings will process them, and then drones will ship them to where they're needed. The network connectivity between buildings and drones plays a key role, and the signals sent between them, as well as numerous other variables, can be used to trigger automations. There are some simple fetch and deliver style automations, but there's also a node-based programming system that can adjust behavior and swap modular components on drones and buildings alike, taking into consideration the size of the available slots, the availability of certain components, the quantity of certain resources stored in local inventory or global storage, health bars, the proximity of enemy units, etc., etc. There is a lot to play with here. It's a powerful tool, unlike anything I've seen in a game like this, and I think it's quite fun to dive into. There's some interesting aspects aside from this in the game as well, like how the modular building and unit system makes everything much more flexible, or how the tech tree works, but the automation is what stood out most to me, and if that sounds intriguing to you, this one's well worth grabbing. The Last Spell released into 1.0 earlier this year, and my oh my is the game addictive. A roguelite RPG set in a dark fantasy world, your mission is to protect the mages located in the middle of your settlements, all in the midst of casting the titular Last Spell that will forever eliminate magic from the world to save it against the hordes of monsters created by said magic. Establish defensive structures, position your heroes based on their capabilities, and arm them with the right tools for the job as you prepare for each nightly onslaught. Turn-based tactical combat means the need for good positioning and the proper use of synergistic abilities, paid for using action points and mana, but the work you do improving and building up the settlement and acquiring resources during the day will have a direct impact on how well you do when attacked at night, and each subsequent day too. From absolutely stunning visuals to a banger of a soundtrack and a ton of procedurally generated challenges to overcome in an exciting narrative, there are many reasons The Last Spell finds itself on this list, each better than the last. This is definitely one to check out. If this video helped you find one of the great gems of 2023, consider hitting the like button. This year had a lot of great games, and these stand out across my favorite genres. I'd love to hear your favorites from the year too, so feel free to drop them in the comments below. For more great games from 2023, check out the video linked on screen right now. Otherwise, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. You'll keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.